Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Ablow.
And I'm Dr. Catherine Munoz.
Another important show here for you because the MAHA group, Make America Healthy Again, this is Robert Kennedy's group, has come out with a report that is not encouraging about the health of adolescents, young people in America. And the statistics are sobering. Things like a 1,400% increase from 1987 to 2014. I don't know why those particular years were the ones they looked at, but from 1987 to 2014, a 1,400% increase in antidepressant prescriptions for young people, for American adolescents between the ages of, let's say 12 and 15 or whatever it might have been. Bottom line is that would seem on the face of it to be incredibly concerning, and that 40% of America's 73 million children have one chronic health condition, at least one chronic health condition. This brings up questions about whether our kids are getting much sicker. Are they being overprescribed? Are they being overdiagnosed? What's happening here? Because the statistics, if looked at just on the face of them, are well, as I said, very sobering.
Yes, it was a very sobering report to read through. It was extremely well done. And I'm guessing the reason they went with those dates was because that was where the most data was in the data set that they were using to analyze, the children. It's hard to find databases with enough information to make a conclusive statement. So I'm guessing that's why they did it. But yeah, I mean, in the report, they say this is the sickest generation in history in children, and that is, like you said, it's just very sobering to hear.
So I'm going to focus on one of the statistics right out of the gate, and that is that 1 in 4 adolescent girls, 1 in 4 teenage girls, 1 out of 4 teenage girls, 25% reported a major depressive episode in 2022. 25% of teenage girls are, according to the report, suffering with major depression. Now, I practiced psychiatry for 25 years. Now I do a ton of life coaching and advising to people in business, et cetera. But, those years are fresh in my mind. And um, I know that depression is rampant. I get that. And yet 25% sounds like a very, very big number. And you start to wonder, is it that a quarter of our teenage young women are literally suffering with major depression, okay, which has specific signs and symptoms before you're supposed to diagnose it? Or could it be that they're being labeled that when in fact they have maybe something that falls short of that, and that they're getting medicated probably with this 1,400% increase in antidepressant use over the course of 1987 to 2014. It's higher now, I bet. Um, is it that people are reaching for their prescription pads too quickly?
Yeah, no, there's a variety of ways to look at it, right? One is like you said, is the prescription pad coming out too fast? Another way to look at it is, is all the social media causing a lot of stress in these young girls, and they're just not able to get away from it, and so they really are depressed. My guess would be that many of the kids that are on these antidepressants or ADHD uh, medications, maybe they don't need to be on them. It's just that it's sometimes the easiest way to handle it immediately. Whereas going through something like behavioral therapy or counseling or getting out in the playground more. I have a playground right near my house. And when we were kids, the playground was packed. The streets were packed, with us playing in them. And it's empty. There's no kids out there.
Or if there are kids out there, they're looking at their cell phones, and that's passing for playing
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And so we certainly have an incredible change culturally in terms of what people are doing and whether they feel supported, whether they feel like they really have interpersonal interaction, are they getting the physical activity they need, et cetera. I
Yeah.
think that one of the take home messages, I think it's almost a dual message, is Number one, you gotta, at this point, be very sensitive to whether your adolescent or teenager in your family may be suffering with depression. Be alert to it. And there's specific signs and symptoms,
Yes.
things like a big change in concentration, the ability to concentrate, low mood, obviously, tearfulness, low self-esteem, lack of appetite, loss of interest in activities that they once were interested in. Grades may fall, friends may fall off. Okay, so you want to know because it's a big risk, okay, if your kids are depressed.
Yes.
Second is to make sure that they're not being labeled if in fact something else is happening. So you can have low mood. I mean, that's one of the reasons we created For Better Mood, the supplement, the number four, not the word, For Better Mood. So you get that at forvitahealth.com, the number four, and then vitahealth.com, because there are naturally occurring substances. There are herbs, amino acids, adaptogens available, and we curated them into one supplement that elevate mood. If you don't have major depression, you wouldn't want to be placed on an antidepressant with all the risks that those entail. If in fact you don't have major depression and you have low mood, and that's it, then you can explore whether a naturally occurring adaptogen or herb or amino acid, or the curated version where we put several ingredients together into For Better Mood at the number four, vitahealth.com. I'll keep saying it because I think it's important that people help, not kids, by the way, we're not talking about kids or adolescents, but even themselves, if they have low mood, they can use For Better Mood to elevate it. It's a good wake up call. And always talk to your doctor, obviously, before doing that and making that decision. But the report about adolescence should give everyone pause.
Yes, it absolutely should. So I don't know if you have seen this in your practice over the years, but one of the things that came out in the report as well was the number of kids who were prescribed ADHD medications were tripled during that time frame of the study. So, really when you're thinking about medications, these types of amphetamines in 6-year olds, it seems like a little bit too much. But one part of the report also talks about, is it because of the diet? Is it these things that are in our diet, which obviously is a focus of RFK, is getting food dyes and just bad ingredients out of our diets. So this was back when I was at the NIH in 1996 or so. So it's been a while. I did one of the studies on children and were they eating enough healthy foods. And it was one of the initial studies that came out from the NHANES, which is a large database that's used. And even at that time, and this was the old food pyramid, which I don't think is necessarily correct because it had, meat in the wrong place, which is really highly important. But when you looked at their intake of the important fruits and vegetables and meats and, the importance of fiber, they were just not getting it then. And I can only imagine that it's worse now because our food supply has changed so much since then.
Well, and it's one of the reasons we started Feel Amazing Daily, not just this radio show, but in fact the whole website, feelamazingdaily.com. I can tell you from decades practicing psychiatry, running outpatient clinics in psychiatry, writing, a New York Times bestseller, etc., writing self-help books, that unfortunately, the truth is that when you go to a psychiatrist these days, you're probably not going to be going to talk much. That sounds crazy, right? It literally sounds crazy that a talking profession that used to have its lifeblood in empathy would turn into a conveyor belt in which people are coming in for 10 or 15 minutes, getting prescriptions written, and going home. And maybe coming in a month later, maybe 2 months later to check and see, well, how are things going? Um, and the answer better be short.
Yes.
And so I think, particularly because we're talking about adolescents and teenagers in this MAHA, Make America Healthy Again report, be careful, okay? Because you want to get to the bottom of what might be causing your kids emotional pain, or even if they have major depression, it doesn't mean that only your brain is involved. Your mind, your life, what's happening on social media, et cetera, all has to be explored. It's not enough to write a prescription. Now, in your own lives, whether it is that someone suggests to you you have attention deficit disorder or someone suggests you have major depression, again, specific signs and symptoms. It's okay to say to a psychiatrist or psychologist or a clinical nurse specialist, tell me the symptoms that I'm displaying that make you feel the diagnosis is warranted. Because if it isn't, a lot of these medicines, which are going to be written in about 10 seconds for you, um, may not be needed. And some of the side effects can include things like dwelling on very negative things, like, do I want to continue my life? I mean, sadly, there's a black box warning on some of these antidepressants that says you might experience suicidal thinking. And of course, you should tell someone if you do. You have to tell somebody, so that you never go there, right? But the bottom line is also feel free to say to your provider of healthcare, and it might be your primary care doctor making your diagnosis of major depression or attention deficit disorder, hey, what are the signs and symptoms that you're relying on to make that diagnosis? Do I have enough of those signs and symptoms? Because otherwise, yeah, let's figure this out. Maybe it's low mood, maybe it's inattention.
Yeah, I mean, and many of these prescriptions are now coming from the primary care office. They're not even seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a life coach like yourself who, would take the time to go through everything and say, this is what my child is experiencing. What's the checklist? Does he or she really need that the ADHD medication or even a sleep medication at this age? What's going on? But so often, and it's unfortunate for in our healthcare system that the primary care physicians are back to back all day long, and so they just don't have the time to dig deep into what's going on. The other thing that stood out to me in the report, and I'm sure you saw this as well, is the average hours of sleep that kids are now getting is half of what they need. And
Amazing.
yeah, that to me says a lot. What are they doing? Are they, staying up, looking at their phones? Are they stressed out? Their minds are racing and they're not getting enough sleep. What's going on in our society and in our families that children are not getting their needs met? And I'm sure you have some de-identified case studies or something that you have seen in your own practice that relates to that.
Well, absolutely. I'm flooded with people coming who want to make sense of their lives, but they come to me because they want to make sense of their lives. Like it wouldn't do to come and say, "Hey, can you introduce me to someone who'll write a prescription right away?" No, no, no. You know me. It's about delving into who are you, what's going on in your life, what could change. And by the way, I'm going to be somebody who, if possible, if you don't have the illness, major depression or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I'm going to say, listen, we created helpful supplements. They're all natural, made in the United States. You go to the number 4, vitahealth.com, and you're able to look at for better mood. That's one of the supplements. For brain fog is another. And for great sleep is another. These are all natural. These are curated products with a number of ingredients that are put together in order to lift your mood or increase your clarity of thought and your ability to attend to things or help you get sleep. And that's very much in the spirit of the Make America Healthy Again movement, because we've got to consider, why did my field, psychiatry, this is the whole reason we started for Vita Health, by the way. Why did my field, psychiatry, I spent 25 years, how can it be that we came up with a list in our diagnostic and statistical manual of 300 disorders? 300 disorders. It's by committee, by the way. They decide which are disorders by committee. Okay, this one looks like there's enough evidence to call it a new illness. Oh, okay. And then not surprisingly, they start matching medicines to those words, those diagnoses. And not surprisingly, they then say, oh, we can bill insurance because it's a diagnosis and we're medicating people and we get paid a whole lot more if we meet with them every 10 minutes than if we actually talk to them about their lives. Empathy heals people. Helping people really get a very clear grip on who they are, what they've lived through, so they can see their life story in bold relief. That is healing. And we have abandoned that healing perspective. So in a sense, is it so surprising that number one, people would be saying, I don't know where to go for help. And I'm not feeling as well. Life is complicated. Social media is encroaching everywhere. Technology seems to want to own me. And at the same time, the medical system is literally caved. It's fallen apart.
Mhm.
And people are just saying, hey, can you get moving? Because here's your prescription. Go fill it.
Yeah.
Um, that's not an answer.
So 2 points to that. One coming from being in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 25 years, and you talk about all these, people may not know what a diagnostic code is, but it's essentially a code that tells your insurance company that go ahead and prescribe, that it's okay to prescribe this drug because the person has disease X or condition Y, for example. But behind
Sure.
the scenes, when you dig really deep into what's going on, the pharmaceutical industry has a big role to play in that as well, because every time a new drug comes out, you have to be able to say that your drug can be used for a code. And if a code doesn't exist, oh, let's do everything we can to create the code. And so it's like you say, it's the whole healthcare system that's broken. And the real, I think, sobering thought, as you would say, to copy some of your words, is that it's prevalent across the country, and there's, thank God, there's people like RFK who are really digging in deep to help us fix this broken system for our children's sake and for our sake in the future.
So I'm going to prescribe something humbly, that's very different. And again, it's not for kids, it's not for adolescents, it's for people, adults. One is take a look at 4vitahealth.com, the number 4vitahealth.com. There you will find our quest, which is to make available natural supplements to treat mood, to lift mood, to help you with your focus, and to help you with your sleep. But don't just do that. Also visit feelamazingdaily.com because luckily we're now reassessing everything. And we're saying, what have we not embraced holistically from nature, from ways of self-healing? That's what we're addressing on feelamazingdaily.com, is those resources that have been swept aside in favor of, and I know you're a nutritional biochemist, you come from the pharmaceutical industry, but you're aware enough to say, okay, those things can be incredibly helpful to people, but not at the expense of not looking at other available remedies.
Absolutely. And, at feelamazingdaily.com, we post articles on a daily basis about family, about specific for men or women or new health technology that's coming up, devices. We have editorials that are written by you and I. And every day we post a new article that either you and I wrote or one of us, that focuses on an incredible health topic, related to family, nutrition, diet, all the things that people just seem to be interested in now, and it's all scientifically based. We don't post something or write something that we can't back up with scientific evidence. So that's one of the main things that we say. If even in our supplements, for great sleep, for better mood, for brain fog, if it doesn't have science behind it, it doesn't go into our product. The same way with our website, if there isn't science behind it, we won't post it. So you can trust that you're getting what I'd like to think of as expert advice.
Well, yeah, I think that's fair. With your background, and I hope mine lends something to the effort. One other thing we should mention is the report from MAHA clearly showed that you got to talk to your teens and adolescents. If they say things or seem to be ambivalent about their lives and whether they can go on, that's got to be addressed, because it's incredibly important, because there's also an epidemic of suicidality in young people, and it's a myth. The idea that you shouldn't speak of it because it might give someone an idea, not true. And sometimes just asking and getting into it with a young person gives them that sense that they're not alone. Oh, somebody really cares. I'm not alone in this. And so I always tell people, don't be afraid that you're going to give someone an idea or it's an unmentionable. It's got to be mentioned. If it crosses your mind, and it maybe should if someone seems really low, then believe me, it's something that's worth talking about. There's just no question. But since, and that's the end of the spectrum. But if you really think about it, there's a lot of folks being overdiagnosed, overtreated with medicines. And that's one of the reasons why you might look to nature. And
Yeah.
we advise people to very frequently. And what does that mean again? I think it means in the face of an entire national movement called the Make America Healthy Again movement. Part of that movement is about what remedies have been overlooked, what can nature offer us. And again, that's why we created feelamazingdaily.com. And it's also why, if you go, which hopefully some folks will, to 4vitahealth.com, the number 4vitahealth.com, not the word, you'll find our best efforts to curate a series of supplements that can lift your mood, reduce brain fog, increase clarity of thought, reduce brain fog, increase clarity of thought, and help with sleep. And so perhaps people will do that, and we certainly encourage them to. And so again, the MAHA report is sobering. There's no question. The Make America Healthy Again report is sobering, and it's worth looking it up online. And it's worth talking to your young people who feel that literally face a myriad now of stresses that they never did before.
So before we go, what is your one key takeaway or one piece of advice that you can leave with the folks?
So I think my one piece of advice is this, and some of it I wish I didn't have to say. My one piece of advice is this: the world's gotten more complicated. The world can exact a higher price emotionally from the people you care about, the young people you care about in your life. You have to communicate with them about what they're experiencing. When you take them to a healthcare provider, you also have to be very careful. Are they being properly diagnosed? Are they being properly treated? And is that healthcare practitioner talking to them? I know it sounds crazy. Why would I have to say that about psychiatry and mental health care? Are they being talked to? But you have to. It's absolutely critical. And I'm so glad people have joined us for this.
Yes, I love that. That was great. So, shall we call it a wrap?
Sounds like a wrap.